Some moments don't warn you before they change everything. And for her, it started with a single step she never expected him to take. Lena had always believed she knew how to read people. But that evening, standing in the quiet hallway outside the rehearsal room, she realized there were things about him she had never noticed, or maybe never allowed herself to. The community center had finally gone still. No footsteps. No muffled chatter. Just soft humming lights and the faint echo of the last song she and the group had practiced. She rubbed her hands together, trying to shake off the tension from the long day. She had left the room early, telling the others she needed water. But really, she just needed space, the kind of space you cannot ask for without worrying someone will misunderstand. She leaned against the wall and let out a slow breath. She was tired of being the one who pretended she was fine. Then she heard footsteps. Slow. Steady. Growing closer. She knew who it was even before she turned. Evan. He rarely walked with that kind of sound. Usually he moved quietly, almost carefully, like someone who didn't want to disturb the air around him. But now his steps were deliberate, as if he wanted her to know he was coming. She straightened but didn't look up right away. She wasn't sure she was ready. Lena. His voice was gentle, but not unsure. He was never unsure when it came to checking on people. Especially her. She finally looked at him. He stood a few feet away, hands tucked in the pockets of his dark jacket, eyes studying her with a softness that made her chest ache. You left pretty quickly, he said. Everything all right? She tried to smile, but it didn't land the way she hoped. I just needed a minute. Nothing big. Evan didn't look convinced. He took a slow step closer. Not too close. But closer than she ever expected. Closer than he usually dared. Her breath caught, but she didn't move back. She didn't want to. What happened in there? He asked quietly. Nothing. The word came out too fast. Too practiced. He waited. That was the thing about Evan. He didn't push. He didn't fill silence with noise. He just waited in that calm way of his until she found her own words. She let her head fall slightly against the wall. It's been a long week. And I just felt overwhelmed. His expression softened even more. Why didn't you say anything? She shrugged. Because she didn't want to be the reason the group worried. Because she didn't want him to worry. Because every time he looked at her with that quiet concern, her heart reacted in ways she wasn't ready to admit. But she couldn't say any of that. I didn't want to make things complicated, she said instead. He took another step closer. This one was unmistakably intentional. Not dramatic. Not bold. Just steady. Close enough that she could see the tiny crease between his brows, the one he only had when he cared too much to hide it. Lena, he said, voice lower now, you don't make things complicated. You never have. Her heartbeat fluttered in her ears. She looked away for a moment, trying to steady her voice before she spoke again. Well, sometimes it feels like I do. He shook his head lightly. If anything feels heavy, you don't have to carry it alone. Something warm rose in her chest, unexpected and confusing. Evan didn't say things like that often. He didn't need to. His actions usually spoke for him. But tonight, he wasn't hiding behind silence. Tonight, he stepped closer. She felt it, the shift in the air between them. The kind that happens when two people stand in a place they've never stood before. He studied her face with quiet patience. You've been distant lately, he murmured. I thought maybe I did something. Her eyes widened slightly. No. You didn't. It's not you. Then what is it? She hesitated. Her thoughts tangled. Her emotions pushed forward. Her chest tightened with the weight of everything she had not said. She parted her lips, ready to tell him a piece of the truth. But the hallway lights flickered suddenly, breaking the moment. She inhaled sharply. Evan glanced up at the ceiling, then back at her, concern returning to his expression. You really are tired, he said softly. She nodded. The flicker had taken away the moment she wasn't sure she was ready for. But it also left something behind. A question. A shift. A gentle stirring she couldn't ignore. She opened her mouth to respond, to say something, anything. But the sound of the rehearsal room door creaking open stopped her. Both of them turned. Someone called her name from inside. Evan looked at her again, as if waiting for her next move. And she felt it, the quiet pull toward him that she had tried so hard not to feel. As she stepped past him to return to the room, she felt something she had never felt from him before. His gaze following her. Not worried. Not confused. Something else. Something she wasn't ready to name. But she felt it. And she knew he did too. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. She reached the doorway, then glanced back at him one last time. He hadn't moved. He just stood there, watching her with an expression she wasn't sure she had ever seen from him. And it left her wondering what might happen the next time he stepped closer. Some people drift into your life quietly. Others step forward in ways you don't see coming. And suddenly, nothing feels the same. Lena felt that shift the moment she walked back into the rehearsal room. It wasn't dramatic. No one else noticed. But she felt it like a soft hum beneath her ribs, the awareness that Evan was standing behind her in the hallway, that he had stepped closer than he ever had before, and that something had changed because of it. The group was already packing up. Music sheets shuffled. Chairs scraped lightly against the floor. Someone laughed at a joke she didn't hear. But all she could think about was the look he gave her. The one she didn't know how to interpret yet. She moved toward her bag, trying to focus, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. And then he came in. Quietly, like he always did. But she felt the shift in the air again as soon as he entered the room. He didn't speak to her. He didn't rush. He didn't even look directly at her right away. But he didn't have to. She already felt him. It was strange, she had known Evan for years. Enough years to know his laugh, his habits, the way he always checked the exits even in familiar places, the way he smoothed the crease of his sleeve when he was nervous. But she had never known him like this. Not with this new closeness hovering between them. He walked over to his things, gathered them slowly, and only then let his gaze find hers. Just a quick glance. Nothing bold. Nothing dramatic. But it hit her harder than it should have. She looked away before anyone noticed. The rehearsal leader dismissed everyone, and the room emptied quickly. Lena kept moving slowly, hoping the swirl of people would hide how unsettled she felt. She lingered near the door, pretending to check her phone even though there was nothing on the screen. Then she felt him stop beside her. Not touching. Not crowding. Just close enough that she didn't have to look to know it was him. "You okay to walk home?" he asked. His voice was soft, but something in it felt heavier than usual. Not worried. Not casual. Something in between. She hesitated. "Yeah. It's not far." He nodded once. But he didn't move. She changed the subject before the silence grew awkward. "You didn't have to check on me earlier." He looked at her fully now. "I know I didn't." Those 4 words wrapped around her more tightly than she expected. She swallowed. "Oh." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not a playful one. A quiet one. "I just noticed," he said. "Noticed what?" He shrugged lightly. "You weren't yourself tonight." She looked down at her shoes. "I didn't think anyone noticed." "I always notice," he said gently. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected him to say it like that. Not with that much sincerity. Not with that much weight. He glanced toward the hallway. "You want to walk together?" Her heart fluttered. "Are you sure? It's out of your way." "It's not." The words came too quickly, and he seemed to realize it because he softened his tone. "It's fine." "Really?" Lena hesitated, but something inside her pushed her to nod. "All right." They stepped out into the cool evening air. The streetlights washed the sidewalk in pale gold, and the wind carried the faint smell of rain even though the sky was clear. For a long stretch, they didn't speak. Not because the silence was uncomfortable, it wasn't. If anything, it felt too easy. Evan walked beside her with his hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders relaxed, gaze forward. But every so often, she felt his eyes flick toward her, checking the small details, how tightly she held her bag, whether her steps slowed, whether she looked tired. He had always been observant. But tonight, he was different. More present. More attuned. More something. Eventually, he broke the silence. Do you want to talk about what overwhelmed you? You don't have to. I just wanted to ask. She looked up at him. He wasn't pushing. He never pushed. I think, she exhaled slowly. I think I just felt like everything hit me at once. And I didn't want everyone staring at me while I tried to deal with it. He nodded. I get that. She glanced at him. Do you? You always seem so calm. He let out a soft breath, almost a laugh. That's because I don't talk about things unless someone asks. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. So, you get overwhelmed too? All the time, he admitted. It surprised her. Not because she thought he was perfect, but because Evan rarely opened up. He listened. He stayed steady. He helped others breathe. But he rarely shared his own heaviness. Her voice softened. Why don't you tell anyone? He hesitated before answering. Then, in the quietest tone she had ever heard from him, he said, because I don't want to burden people. The words hit her hard. Harder than she expected. She slowed her pace without thinking. You're not a burden. He looked at her, and for a moment, a brief, fragile one, she saw something unguarded in his expression. Something vulnerable. Something tender. Something he had never shown her before. She opened her mouth to say more. But a car passed by, splashing water from the curb and breaking the moment. They both stepped back instinctively, and the tension dissolved, not completely, but enough that the air felt different again. When the car noise faded, Evan looked at her once more. You always say the right thing at the wrong time, he murmured. She smiled faintly. Sorry. Don't be, he said quietly. They reached the corner where their paths would soon split. But neither of them slowed. Neither of them seemed ready to. Something unsaid hung between them, soft, warm, and impossibly fragile. And neither of them knew what to do with it yet. Some feelings don't rush in loudly. They appear in small breaths, quiet steps, and moments you don't recognize as important until later. Lena felt that truth with every block they walked. The night was calm around them. Soft wind. Distant traffic. The kind of stillness that made every unspoken thought sound louder in her head. Evan walked close enough that she could feel his presence, but not so close that it felt deliberate. He had always been good at giving space. Yet somehow, tonight, he still felt nearer than he ever had before. They reached the small intersection where their paths usually split, where she turned left toward her street, and he continued straight toward his. But neither of them slowed down. At the last second, she glanced up at him. Your place is straight ahead. He nodded. I know. She blinked, confused. You're walking me all the way. His eyes shifted to hers, steady and warm. If you don't mind. Her stomach fluttered. I don't mind. He gave a faint smile, small, almost shy, and they continued walking together. Lena's heart picked up a little. This wasn't normal. He had never walked her this far before. Maybe once or twice after a late rehearsal, but never like this. Never with this kind of quiet intention. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You didn't have to go out of your way. Maybe I wanted to, he said simply. It took her a moment to breathe again after that. They turned onto her street, lined with tall trees whose branches swayed gently overhead. She thought he would say something more. But he didn't. And somehow, that silence felt louder than any words could have been. Finally, she spoke. Evan, why were you so worried earlier? He took a slow breath. I wasn't worried. She looked at him, puzzled. He corrected himself softly. I was concerned. There's a difference. And what's the difference? She asked. Worry feels distant, he said. Concern feels close. Her chest tightened. She had no idea what to say to that. She wasn't even sure she understood it fully. But she felt it. Maybe that was enough. They reached the small stone walkway leading up to her apartment building. Warm light spilled from the overhead lamp, giving the steps a gentle glow. Evan slowed first. Lena turned toward him, the night air suddenly feeling heavier. Thank you for walking with me, she said. You don't need to thank me. Still, she whispered, I'm glad you came. He held her gaze, and something soft flickered across his expression, something she had never seen from him so openly. Lena, he said quietly, I meant what I told you earlier. About noticing things. She swallowed. Like what? His eyes moved slowly over her face, not in a way that crossed any lines, not in a way that felt too bold, but in a way that made her heart flutter just the same. You've been carrying a lot lately, he murmured. More than you admit. And I don't like watching you hide it. Her breath caught. How do you always know? She whispered. He hesitated, then answered with simple honesty. Because I pay attention to you. Her hand tightened around her bag strap. Not because she felt nervous, but because the emotion behind his voice startled her. He had never said anything like that. Ever. She felt warmth rise in her chest, slow and steady, like a sunrise she hadn't expected. Before she could respond, a door from across the street slammed shut, breaking the moment. They both flinched slightly, glancing toward the sound. Then the silence returned, softer this time, more fragile. Lena shifted her weight. I should get inside. Yeah, he said. It's late. But neither of them moved. She took a small breath. Evan, earlier, when you stepped closer in the hallway. I didn't expect that. His expression didn't change immediately. But his eyes did, a quiet spark, a flicker of something deeper. I didn't expect it either, he admitted. I just felt like you needed someone there. She looked down, then back up. Well, it meant a lot. He nodded once, slow and thoughtful. I'm glad. The wind brushed past them, carrying a soft chill that made her grip her jacket a little tighter. Evan noticed instantly. You should go in, he said gently. You're cold. She nodded, even though she wasn't sure she wanted the moment to end. She stepped backward onto the first stair. Well, good night, Evan. Good night, Lena. Their eyes held for a moment longer than a simple goodbye required. Something unspoken passed between them. Something neither of them dared name yet. Finally, she turned toward the door. But before she opened it, she heard him call her name. Lena. She turned back. He stood still, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly tense, as if he was fighting with himself about something he wanted to say. Her voice softened. What is it? He took a breath. Opened his mouth. Then closed it again. Nothing, he said quietly. Get some rest. She nodded, though disappointment tugged at her chest. She stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind her. But as she leaned against it, heart pounding, she realized one thing. He hadn't taken a step closer that night in the hallway by accident. Not even a little. Some nights stay with you long after they end. And for Lena, that night replayed in her mind again and again, every step, every glance, every almost confession he didn't quite let himself say. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the way Evan looked at her under the soft streetlight. Not confused. Not casual. But as if he had been holding something in for a long time. The next morning, the world felt quieter. Lena moved through her day with a lingering softness in her chest she couldn't explain. She tried to distract herself with errands, chores, anything. But nothing pushed away the memory of his voice telling her, I pay attention to you. By late afternoon, she gave up pretending she wasn't waiting for her phone to buzz. It didn't. Not at first. Not until early evening, when she was sitting on her balcony with a cold drink and a restless heart. Her phone vibrated once. A simple message. Evan, are you home? Her breath caught. She typed back with slightly trembling fingers. Lena, yeah. Is everything okay? His reply came almost instantly. Evan, can I stop by for a minute? She froze. Her heart picked up speed, steady but strong, as if bracing for something that had been waiting in the background for too long. She typed one word. Yes. Then she stood too fast, brushed her hands nervously against her jeans, and checked the mirror as if it mattered. It didn't. Not really. But love, or whatever was slowly inching its way toward love, had a way of making even the smallest details feel important. A few minutes later, a knock sounded at her door. Soft. Purposeful. Him. She inhaled deeply and opened it. Evan stood there, hands in his pockets, hair slightly messy from the wind. But it wasn't his appearance that startled her. It was something in his expression. A quiet resolve. A decision already made. "Hi," he said. "Hi." He stepped inside when she moved back, closing the door gently behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt too full of things unspoken. Too full of everything left hanging between them the night before. Finally, Evan exhaled, breaking the silence. "I'm sorry if I made things weird last night," he said quietly. "You didn't," she replied. "Not at all." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing her words before answering. "I just kept thinking about the way you looked when you walked out of the rehearsal room." His eyes met hers. "You looked overwhelmed, and I should have asked sooner." "You did ask," she reminded him softly. "And you were there." He shook his head. "No. I was cautious. Too cautious." Her breath shifted. What was he trying to say? He stepped a little closer, not as close as the hallway, but closer than a casual conversation required. "I've been cautious with you for a long time," he admitted. Her heart skipped. "Why?" He swallowed once, eyes flickering down before lifting again. "Because I wasn't sure if stepping closer would make you uncomfortable." Her chest warmed. "It didn't," she whispered. He held her gaze for a long, fragile moment. "So it's okay if I'm honest with you now?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." He took another step forward. This time, she didn't need to steady her breath. Her heart steadied itself. "I notice when you're tired," he said. "When you're overwhelmed. When you pretend you're fine even though you're not." His voice dropped just slightly. "And last night, when you looked at me outside your building, I realized I wasn't imagining things." She blinked. "Imagining what?" "That something's been shifting between us," he said softly. The room seemed to still. She felt her pulse in her fingertips, in her throat, everywhere. Lena nodded once, barely. "You're not imagining it," she whispered. Evan let out a breath, one he had probably been holding for days, weeks, maybe months. "I thought so," he murmured. She took a tiny step closer now, closing the inches between them until the space felt shared instead of separate. "Evan," her voice shook slightly. "What were you going to say last night? When you stopped yourself?" He looked down for a moment, gathering the words he had denied himself before. Then he lifted his eyes. "I was going to tell you that I care about you more than I've ever said out loud." Her breath trembled. "I care about you too," she said softly. Something in his expression shifted, relief first, then something warmer. He stepped closer. This time, closer than the hallway. Closer than the streetlight. Close enough that she could see the subtle rise and fall of his breath. "But," he said gently, "I needed to hear you say that." She smiled, small, sincere, a little shaky. "I know." Their eyes held. The moment stretched. Soft. Steady. Warm. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just two people finally stepping into the same space. But before either of them said anything more, a sudden knock echoed from the hallway outside, loud enough to break the moment in half. Both of them startled, turning their heads toward the door. Evan looked back at her with raised eyebrows. "Are you expecting anyone?" She shook her head. "No." They stared at the door for a beat. The knocking came again, firmer this time. Evan took a slow breath and whispered, "Stay here." Lena nodded, heart suddenly racing for reasons she couldn't name. Evan moved toward the door, reaching for the knob. And as he pulled it open, Lena felt the air shift again, not in fear, but in the unmistakable sense that whatever was about to happen next would change everything. Some moments arrive quietly, and others knock loud enough to stop your heart for a second. For Lena, that knock felt like both. Evan pulled the door open, shoulders squared just enough to show he was ready for anything. But the tension in him eased almost instantly. Standing in the hallway was Mrs. Alden, Lena's elderly neighbor from 2 floors down. Confused, breathless, clutching a small bag that looked too heavy for her to carry. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know you had company." Lena hurried forward. "It's okay, Mrs. Alden. What's wrong?" I knocked on the wrong door," the woman admitted, embarrassed. I needed help carrying this to the elevator, but my eyes aren't what they used to be. Before Lena could speak, Evan stepped forward gently. I can help you with that, he said. Mrs. Alden brightened with relief. You're so kind, young man. He lifted the bag with ease, offering her a reassuring smile. Which floor? Second. I'll take it there for you. As Evan and the elderly neighbor walked down the hall, Lena stood at her doorway, watching them. And in that moment, something inside her softened even more. He didn't hesitate. Not for a second. He just helped, naturally, quietly, without needing praise. That was Evan. That had always been Evan. But tonight, seeing him like this, it hit her in a new way. Within a few minutes, he returned, brushing a bit of dust from his hands as he stepped back inside. Sorry about that, he said. Don't be, she replied softly. He shut the door gently. Then he turned toward her, and the moment picked up right where it had paused. The air between them settled again, warm and steady. But something had changed. The interruption didn't break anything. It clarified it. Lena gave a small smile. You didn't have to help her. I know, he said. But you would have. Her breath caught. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't performing kindness. He was simply showing who he had always been. Evan took a few quiet steps toward her again, closing the distance they'd lost. You were saying something, she whispered. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I was. His voice softened. I care about you, Lena. More than I've ever said. More than I knew how to say. Her chest tightened in the best way. I care about you too, she said again, this time without hesitation. He exhaled, a sound full of relief and something warm, almost trembling. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, really looked. Then he spoke again. I didn't step closer in that hallway just because you looked overwhelmed, he said quietly. I stepped closer because I've wanted to for a long time. Her pulse fluttered. How long? Long enough that pretending I didn't feel it started to feel like lying. She swallowed. I didn't know. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, he admitted. You mean a lot to me. And I didn't want to ruin what we already had. You didn't ruin anything, she said gently. You just made it clearer. He smiled, not wide, but real. The kind of smile that shows up when someone finally stops holding something in. Good, he murmured. Because I'm tired of holding back. Lena stepped closer, closing the last inch between them. Not touching. Not crossing any lines. Just close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Close enough to feel the truth settle between them. I'm glad you came tonight, she whispered. Me too. Another soft silence wrapped around them, not empty, but full of everything they'd both kept quiet for too long. She took a slow breath. So, what happens now? Evan's eyes softened. That depends, he said. Do you want me to stay, or do you want some time to think? The question warmed her heart. He wasn't assuming. Wasn't rushing. He was giving her choice, even now. She shook her head gently. I don't need time, she said. I just needed honesty. He nodded once, slow, meaningful. Then I'll stay, he whispered. They moved to the couch, sitting close enough that their shoulders brushed, a small, quiet connection that felt like it had been waiting for months. They talked. Not about big declarations. Not about dramatic promises. Just small things, how long he'd noticed her withdrawing, the little signs she'd missed, the thoughts he'd kept quiet because he didn't want to overwhelm her. And she shared things too. Worries. Fears. Moments she'd pretended didn't hurt because she didn't want to seem fragile. He listened with the same tenderness he'd always shown, but now, he didn't hide the emotion behind it. Hours passed softly around them. At one point, she leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. Not a bold move. Not even planned. It just happened. He stilled for a second, surprised, then rested his cheek lightly against the top of her head. No rush. No pressure. Just closeness. The kind he had been holding back from. The kind she had been afraid to want. The kind they finally let themselves feel. When it grew late, Evan whispered, I should head home. Lena lifted her head slowly. Yeah, probably. He stood, then hesitated, not unsure, just thoughtful. "Lena." She looked up at him. He offered a gentle smile, warm enough to melt everything tight in her chest. "I'm really glad you opened the door." She smiled too, soft and full. "Me too." He stepped toward the exit, then glanced back one last time. "Good night." "Good night, Evan." The door closed with a soft click. Lena leaned against the wall, heart full, breath steady. For the first time in a long time, everything felt clear. He had stepped closer. And she had stepped closer too. Not just in the hallway. Not just at her door. But in every small moment that had led them here, to this quiet, honest beginning.